From the moment she was old enough to understand whispers, she knew something was wrong with the way her family looked at her. It was always the disappointment, the impatience, the quiet resentment that built over the years like dust collecting in corners. Her limp, born from a childhood fever that weakened one leg, became the excuse for everything they disliked about her. When she struggled to keep up with chores, they sighed loudly. When she fell behind on errands, they muttered that she was slow or useless. No one ever asked whether she was in pain, whether she needed help, or whether she feared falling behind again. They only saw the flaw, and flaws in her family's eyes were burdens. By the time she turned 18, the pressure in the household grew suffocating. Her father kept counting coins at the table, frustrated by how little they had. Her mother avoided looking at her when marriage prospects arose. The younger siblings mimicked the adults' disdain, making her feel like a stranger in her own home. She began to withdraw, moving quietly, speaking less, hoping that if she made herself small enough, perhaps they would forget to be disappointed in her. But families do not forget what they decide is wrong. One cold morning, she went outside to fetch water when she heard the low murmur of her parents' voices behind the thin cabin wall. Her father's tone was hard. "She's not marrying. No dowry's coming. She slows us down. You know it. We can't feed an extra mouth that gives nothing back." Her mother's response was a trembling sigh. "What do you suggest?" There was a long pause, and then her father said something that made the world tilt sideways. "There's a broker passing through next week. He buys laborers. It might be the only way." She froze, her hands clutching the bucket until her knuckles turned white. Sold. They were talking about selling her. Not as a daughter. Not even as a person. As labor, as property. As a burden to be traded away like livestock or tools. For a moment, she could not breathe. All week she waited for someone, anyone to say it wasn't true. That they would never do such a thing. But no one did. Instead, her mother began avoiding her eyes, and her father grew strangely polite, as if speaking too harshly would make the guilt heavier. Even the meals became smaller, as though they were already preparing for her absence. The broker arrived on a dusty gray horse, his coat long and stained from travel. He looked her up and down with the trained glance of someone who assessed bodies the way others evaluated goods. He frowned when he saw her limp, and her father, desperate to get rid of her, lowered the price as though that limp outweighed everything else she was. "She's damaged," her father said in a low voice, but she heard every syllable. "That's why I'm offering her cheap." Her chest tightened. Damaged. The word struck her harder than any slap could have. The broker paid without bargaining further. Her mother placed a small bundle of clothes into her hands. No hug, no farewell, just a final act of practicality. Her siblings gathered near the doorway, curious but unmoved. None of them asked her to stay. She was led away. She turned back once, searching for a sign that someone cared. But the door was already closing, shutting her out of the only home she had ever known. She walked on, feeling hollow, uprooted, and painfully alone. Yet somewhere deep within her, beneath the betrayal, beneath the humiliation, a tiny ember flickered. A quiet, stubborn belief that she was more than what they had labeled her, though no one else saw it yet. That small ember refused to die. The journey to the auction felt endless. Days blurred into one another as the broker's wagon rattled along the uneven roads, each jolt sending pain through her weakened leg. She sat in the back, knees drawn to her chest, listening to the creak of wheels and the distant calls of birds, sounds that felt strangely foreign now that she was no longer part of any place. Every so often the broker glanced back as if to make sure she hadn't run. She never would. She had nowhere to run to. When they finally reached the outskirts of the ranching territory, she noticed the landscape shift. The air smelled fresher, the sky stretched wider, and rolling fields gave way to valleys dotted with cattle. She had heard stories of the wealthy ranchers who lived out here, men who owned hundreds of acres and had crews of workers at their command. Men who bought and sold hands the same way her family had just done to her. The auction grounds were busy when they arrived, wagons pulling in, ranch hands shouting greetings, horses stamping impatiently. She watched from the wagon seat as laborers were lined up like livestock, each one inspected for strength, health, and endurance. Her throat tightened. Soon she would be standing there too, judged by strangers. The broker tugged her forward and positioned her at the end of a narrow platform. People turned their heads, some curious, some indifferent, some grimacing when they noticed her limp. Their whispers curled around her like smoke. Damaged. Slow. Not worth much. Each word made her shrink a little more inside, though her face remained expressionless. She had learned long ago that showing pain only invited more of it. Then the bidding began. Men raised hands for the strongest workers first, broad-shouldered boys who lifted crates with ease. Women who moved with practiced efficiency. Names were called, numbers shouted, money exchanged. One by one, laborers were claimed. When her turn came, the man running the auction hesitated before calling her forward. His eyes flicked to her leg. "One female hand?" he announced reluctantly. "Light work only?" "Minor injury. Minor injury." The way he said it held a world of dismissal. Silence followed. A few ranchers shook their heads. One muttered something about dead weight. Another snorted. Pass. Heat rose in her cheeks. She stared at the ground, wishing the earth would open and swallow her whole. Then a new voice spoke. One bid. It was steady, low, and common like the rough calls of the others. She lifted her eyes just enough to see him, a tall man standing near the back hat shading his face. His clothes were plain but clean, his boots polished, and his posture carried quiet authority. Lucas Halle. She didn't know his name yet. Didn't know he was one of the wealthiest men in 3 counties. Didn't know he had a reputation for fairness that ran deeper than most men's pockets. She only knew he was watching her, not the limp, not the flaw. Her. No one else bid. Why would they? The auctioneer blinked, surprised, but quick to finalize the sale. Sold. The word landed heavily. Sold again. But this time, somehow, it felt different. Lucas approached her without rushing, his gaze steady but gentle. "You've had a long day," he said softly, as though speaking to someone who deserved kindness. "Let's get you some food before we head out." She stared at him, unsure how to respond. No man had ever spoken to her like that, not as property, not as a burden, but as a person. She nodded faintly. Lucas offered his hand to help her down from the platform. She hesitated, then placed her trembling fingers in his palm. His grip was firm but careful, as though he understood she'd been handled roughly for a long time. As he guided her toward his horse-drawn wagon. A strange sensation bloomed quietly in her chest, something like relief, something like hope, something she hadn't felt in years. It frightened her, but it also warmed her in a way nothing else had. The Halle Ranch came into view just as the sun dipped low behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. She stared at the sprawling land from the wagon seat, unsure what to feel. Rows of fencing stretched across the fields, cattle grazed in quiet clusters, and the main house, large, warm-lit, and sturdily built, sat like a guardian watching over everything. It was unlike anything she had ever known. Too peaceful. Too open. Too kind. Lucas guided the wagon toward the barn, his voice calm as he pointed out different areas: the cattle pens, the feed storehouse, the bunkhouses for the ranch hands. But he didn't overwhelm her with instructions or expectations. He simply showed her the land as if he were introducing her to a place she deserved to belong to. When they stopped outside the barn, a few ranch hands approached. They looked from her to Lucas, curiosity etched on their faces. She braced herself for ridicule, for the whispers she'd grown used to. She felt her muscles tense, ready for the sting of judgment. Instead, Lucas spoke before anyone else could. "This is Elise," he said, using her name with a quiet dignity no one outside her family ever had. "She be staying here and helping with light work until she finds her footing." The men nodded respectfully, offering simple greetings. Not pitying, not mocking, just normal. That alone unsettled her more than cruelty would have. Lucas led her to a small, tidy room attached to the main house. It wasn't grand, but it was clean, warm, and private luxuries she'd never had. A narrow bed sat against the wall. beside a wooden dresser and a small window overlooking the horse paddock. I had the room cleared this morning, he said. Figured you'd appreciate some space to rest. You prepared before you even bought me? She blurted, surprised. Lucas chuckled softly. No one should arrive to an empty corner of a barn. You're not cargo. The words hit her harder than she expected. She lowered her gaze, unsure how to answer. Being spoken to gently was almost painful, like touching a bruise she didn't know she still carried. Over the next few days, she began to adjust to life on the ranch. Lucas didn't throw her into heavy tasks. Instead, he taught her slowly. They fed the chickens together in the early mornings, walked the perimeter fences in the afternoons, and sat quietly in the evenings while she learned how to mend small tears and saddle straps. He never rushed her, never scolded her when her legs slowed her down, never made her feel like a mistake. Gradually, she began to see pieces of herself that had been buried under years of shame. She discovered she was good with animals, especially the skittish ones. One mare in particular, a pale gray beauty named Willow, responded to her touch with surprising ease. Even Lucas noticed. She likes you, he said one afternoon as Willow nuzzled against Elise's shoulder. Not many people earn her trust that quickly. Elise blinked, startled by the compliment. I don't know why, she murmured. I'm not very good at much. Lucas leaned against the fence, watching her gently stroke Willow's mane. Maybe someone convinced you of that? Doesn't make it true? The words settled in her heart like warm sunlight breaking through clouds. She didn't believe them yet, but she wanted to dot as the days turned into weeks. She began waking each morning with something unfamiliar stirring inside her. Anticipation. The ranch offered a kind of quiet rhythm, steady, patient, forgiving. She found herself smiling when she didn't mean to, humming under her breath while working, standing a little taller even when her leg ached. Lucas noticed, though he said nothing. He simply met her small glimmers of hope with a steady presence. Never pushing, only supporting, for the first time in her life. She didn't feel like a burden. She felt like she was healing. Spring storms in the ranching country came with little warning. One moment the sky was clear and blue, and the next dark clouds rolled over the hills, swallowing the sun with their heavy shadows. The morning had begun peacefully enough, with Elise brushing Willow's coat while Lucas oversaw the feeding of the cattle. But by midday the wind picked up, bending the grass in sharp waves and sending dust swirling through the air. Storm's coming fast, Lucas muttered, scanning the horizon. We need to get the horses secured before it hits. The ranch hands hurried to their tasks, securing doors and hurrying animals into safer enclosures. Elise followed Lucas toward the paddock, trying to help in whatever small ways she could. The pressure in the air felt electric, warning of something more dangerous than just rain. Thunder rumbled in the distance like a restless beast awakening. As they reached the paddock, a flash of movement caught Elise's eye. A young colt, high-strung and barely halter-broke, had panicked at the sound of thunder. Before anyone could react, the colt kicked open the latch with a frantic jolt and bolted through the gap, galloping straight toward the open fields where a shallow ravine waited like a hungry mouth. Lucas cursed under his breath. Not that way. He'll break a leg if he goes into the ravine. He started running after the colt, but Elise, without thinking, went first. Her limp slowed her, but determination pushed her forward. Pain shot up her leg with every stride, but she didn't stop. She could hear Lucas shouting her name, telling her to wait, but she didn't listen. The colt was too fast. Too frightened someone had to reach him before he plunged into danger. She veered toward the side, taking a path that cut closer to the ravine. She knew she couldn't outrun the colt, but she might be able to intercept him. Heart pounding, breath burning, she positioned herself near a cluster of boulders that forced the terrain into a narrow turn. The colt thundered toward her, eyes wide with panic, hooves kicking up clods of wet earth. Elise raised her hands, not to block him, but to steady him with her voice, the same calm tone she had used with Willow so many times. It's okay, she called softly, despite her shaking. Easy, boy, easy, you're all right. At first the colt didn't slow, but something in her voice, steady, soothing, familiar, cut through his fear. His gallop faltered, hesitated. Elise took one slow step closer, ignoring the scream of pain in her leg. Good boy. That's it. Slow down. The colt stopped only a few feet from her, sides heaving, eyes wild but no longer blind with terror. Elise reached out a trembling hand, letting him sniff her fingers before gently stroking his muzzle. He lowered his head, breathing hard, but calmer now by the time Lucas reached them. Breathless and soaked in the first sheets of rain, he stared at the scene before him in stunned silence. Elise, standing tall despite her limp, had tamed the storm inside the colt with nothing more than courage and instinct. Elise, he breathed, awe softening every line of his face. How did you? She shrugged weakly, still stroking the colt. He was scared, I just understood it. Lucas stepped closer, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. You did more than understand. You saved him. Most seasoned ranch hands couldn't have done what you did. The wind roared around them, but Elise hardly heard it. She felt a flush of warmth spread through her chestnut pride exactly, but something deeper. Something healing. For the first time, she looked Lucas in the eyes without fear. And in his gaze she saw something she had never seen in anyone before. Respect, not pity. Not annoyance. Not the cruel dismissal she'd known all her life. Respect. And that changed everything. For weeks after the storm, life on the ranch settled into a new rhythm. Elise continued working with the horses, her confidence slowly blossoming with each small success. The ranch hands no longer saw her as a fragile newcomer. They respected her quiet bravery and the instinctive way she handled animals. Lucas, though he rarely said much directly, watched her progress with a mixture of admiration and concern. Concern because he could see how deeply she still feared making mistakes. How easily she flinched at the idea of disappointing anyone. But just when she began to feel safe, the past she thought she had escaped returned with an unexpected and brutal force. It was a warm afternoon when it happened. Elise had just finished brushing Willow and was heading toward the main house when she heard voices angry. Familiar voices carrying across the yard. Her steps slowed. Her stomach tightened. The air seemed to turn colder with each second. Her family was there. Her father stood stiff and indignant, her mother beside him with a tight, rehearsed expression. Even her older brother had come, arms crossed, wearing the same arrogant smirk he used whenever he sensed power tilting his way. They looked utterly out of place surrounded by the open ranch land. Elise froze, every muscle locking into place as old fear washed over her. Lucas stepped out of the barn, his jaw tightening when he saw the intruders. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone polite but edged with warning. Her father puffed up like a man suddenly remembering his authority. "We've come to take back our girl," he said. "There's been a misunderstanding." Elise felt the ground tilt beneath her. Take back? After all this time? After selling her like a piece of broken equipment? Lucas remained still, unreadable. Your daughter was sold to a broker. I purchased her legally. And since then, she has earned her place here. Her mother stepped forward with false sympathy. You must understand she didn't want to go. She was confused, emotional. We were desperate. But she belongs with her family. Elise's heart pounded painfully. Belongs? With the people who had cast her aside without hesitation? She wanted to speak, to shout the truth, but the old habit of silence held her tongue. Her father sensed it and seized control of the moment. She's our blood, he said sharply. And she's coming home. You have no right to keep her. Lucas's eyes darkened, but he did not move. That depends on what she wants? The words struck Elise like a bolt of lightning. What she wants. No one had ever asked her that ever. She looked at Lucas, his steady gaze offering reassurance without pressure. Then she looked at her family. Her mother's cold impatience. Her father's hardened arrogance. Her brother's mocking smirk, as if he expected her to crumble. Suddenly, she saw everything clearly. She remembered the childhood spent trying to earn their approval. The endless shame of being the slow one. The day they sold her, calling her damaged as if she were beyond repair. They didn't want her, they wanted control, or worse. They wanted whatever benefit they thought her connection to Lucas might bring. Her father stretched out his arm toward her. Come on, he demanded. We're leaving. Elise took a step back. No. The single word came out quietly, but it carried the strength of someone who had been broken and rebuilt. Someone who finally understood her own worth. Her father blinked in disbelief. What did you say? She swallowed, her voice trembling but firm. I'm not going with you. You sold me. You made your choice. Her mother snapped. You're being foolish. No. Elise straightened, her voice stronger this time. I choose my own life now. Lucas stepped beside her, not claiming her, not speaking for her, simply standing as her shield if she needed one. Her father's face twisted in anger, but he knew he had lost. The Halle Ranch was powerful territory. Lucas was not a man to challenge lightly, with frustrated curses and bitter stares. Her family turned and left, the sound of their wagon wheels fading into the distance as silence settled. Elise's body trembled, not in fear, but in release. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she wiped them quickly. Lucas looked at her with quiet pride. You were brave, he said softly, for the first time. She believed it. Asterisk in the days following her family's departure. Elise moved through the ranch with a quiet sense of disbelief. She had spoken back to them. She had defended herself. She had chosen to stay. The weight of what she'd done settled slowly, like dust after a long storm. Some moments she felt proud, steadfast, steady, certain. Other moments, her courage wavered. She wondered whether she had been too bold, too foolish. What if Lucas regretted taking her in? What if she had caused trouble? But each time doubt crept in, something gently pushed it away. The way the ranch hands greeted her with easy smiles now. The way Willow trotted toward her as soon as she approached the paddock. And most of all, the way Lucas watched her not with doubt or hesitation, but with a patient fondness that made her heart flutter in ways she didn't yet understand. Still, the confrontation had shaken her, stirring memories she had tried to bury. One evening, long after the ranch quieted and lanterns glowed in the windows, she sat alone behind the barn. The sky was deep with stars, the air cool and soft. She hugged her knees, letting tears fall freely, tears she couldn't release earlier when she'd needed to appear strong. Lucas found her there. He didn't announce himself. He didn't ask why she cried. He simply sat beside her on the wooden step, giving her room while offering presents. She wiped her face, embarrassed. I'm sorry, she whispered. I shouldn't cry like this. Why not? Lucas asked gently. You've been through more than most people do in a lifetime. Crying doesn't make you weak. She lowered her gaze. I thought maybe you'd think less of me. Lucas turned slightly toward her, the lantern light casting a warm glow on his face. Elise, he said softly, I have never once thought less of you. Not when I saw you struggling. Not when I saw you afraid. Not even when you doubted yourself. She swallowed, her voice barely a breath. They called me damaged. His jaw tightened. They were wrong. She met his eyes, then truly met them, and what she saw made her breath catch. There was no pity, no sense of charity or obligation, just steady admiration. And something deeper. You are strong, Lucas continued. Stronger than anyone who tried to break you. You are kind, brave, and you see animals and people in ways most folks never will. Her heart swelled painfully. No one had ever spoken about her like this. No one had ever seen her like this. The silence between them grew tender, peaceful. It wrapped around them like a warm blanket. Elise breathed slowly, letting the truth settle inside her. She was safe. She was valued. She belonged. Over the following weeks, life blossomed into something richer. Elise's limp improved as she gained strength, though she still moved with a slight unevenness. Lucas never cared. He admired her determination. She found herself laughing more, speaking more freely, and sharing bits of her past pieces she'd never dared voice before. Lucas listened with the patience of someone who held her stories gently. Their bond deepened naturally, quietly. It wasn't a sudden spark, it was steady warmth that grew day by day, like embers nurturing a fire. One evening at sunset, Lucas walked beside her to the paddock. The sky glowed orange and gold, the air smelled of hay and blooming brush. He stopped, turning to her with a seriousness she had never seen in him before. Elise! This ranch is stronger with you here. I am stronger with you here. Her breath caught. Lucas. He took her hands rough, warm, steady. I don't want you to stay because I bought you or rescued you. I want you to stay because you want a life here. With me. Her chest trembled with emotion. But her answer came easily. I do. It was simple, honest, true. The girl once sold as damaged stood tall beside the man who saw her worth and claimed her future as her own. She was no longer defined by what others had done to her. She was defined by the strength she had built and the love she had finally found.